monarch in Switzerland, as well as in London in organizational and affective neuroscience. So I'm looking forward to sharing you about my work in organizational well-being and personal health and personal function around how the brain can help you show up and what happens to the brain when you are not in your best, and how the brain also gets in the way. So I'm hoping today we're going to have a bit of fun. The idea is to start off with something very important. So we're going to go through a couple of sections. But the first section that I would like to speak about is Mitzi, okay? And Mitzi is a little kitten of ours. And why Mitzi is important, because she knows well-being like no other. Mitzi started off life not in a very healthy place. We found her abandoned under our car. And Mitzi was saying this meow, 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 this little sound. We didn't know where it was coming from. And eventually we found her. She was the size of a phone. You know, she was minute. We found her in the engine of the car. And it was such a stressful time. We thought she was going to die. But Mitzi has shown that she can flourish, and she's come back to live a very happy life. So Mitzi is a good example of how we are going to enjoy today together. The idea for today is for you to start thinking. And the thought I want you to have in mind is, what would you do now if you knew you could live forever? Okay. Would you stay in this presentation to hear what we're going to discuss? Would you go off and climb Mount Everest, or I don't know, whatever you wanted to do? I'll have a think about that as we go through the presentation today. The reason we're going to do that is going to help you inform your brain around what is going to get you to improve your well-being, one brain cell at a time, by having a healthy perception of yourself. So if we go into the next slide, we can understand that I'm going to be looking at 5 sections with you. Hopefully we'll get through this in an hour. Hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. But if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. In fact, just drop a note to say hi. The first person to drop a note to say hi, I'll give you a copy of my book. So do it as quick as you like. The goal for today is to have some fun together. If you've got a notepad or a phone to make some notes on, that'll be useful, because it will do some little games down the road. I'm still finishing my coffee, so sorry about that. But please do drop any notes in the chat. Remember, first person to drop their name in the book, in the chat, gets a book. So let's get going with this. Abhishek, I don't know if the chat is working, but let's assume it is. So I want to get through 5 points. Little introduction, which we're going to get through now. Some of the science around what happens in the brain, specifically around neuroplasticity to improve well-being. And then we're going to move on to impact on leadership, on leading yourself, and how that then can have an impact on neuroplasticity and your own personal, professional development. And then we will discuss some next steps as we go ahead. So let's start first with the relevance of neuroplasticity for understanding your personal well-being. So the first place to think about this is to think about a Vespa. Now, the reason I want you to think about a Vespa, because it's a fun bike to get around on. It's, you know, out in the fresh air. It's kind of, but it also has danger. It also has an opportunity for you to run into risk. So what I would like you to do is have a little look at this picture of me. If you know where this is, please drop it in the chat, and I will give you a surprise as well. So feel free to drop any notes into the chat. In fact, just drop your name into the chat so that we can have a conversation, because I'm much better at conversation than I am at presentation. So let's make this an interactive conversation. And if you put me back into personal view, whatever it's called, Abhishek, if you put it out of presentation mode and you put the focus on me, we're going to have a discussion that I hope is going to be relevant for your own well-being and your own development, everybody. So in the chat, tell me what are the things that you would like to focus on for your own well-being. What would you like to address? What would you like to speak about? What are the things that you come up? Is it insomnia? Is it weight? Anxiety? I don't know. Have a think and tell me what you think. So the reason I've got a picture of Chapman's Peak back, if you go back to presentation mode, Abhishek, you can see the picture of Chapman's Peak. Those of you who recognize my accent as South African, you would recognize this as Cape Town. And I was driving this Vespa, and I bought it because I really wanted to buy an AC Cobra sports car. And the Italian that you saw in the picture, that friendly Italian guy, said you should rather buy the Vespa because it's much more fun and it's much cheaper. So I bought the Vespa, and I was riding home and had a great time. And what happened, unfortunately, next day on the way to work, I had a really weird experience. I was driving along, and then I saw this child running into the road. So I swerved on the Vespa and carried on regardless. And then about a minute later, everything went black. I mean, it just completely blacked out. And what happened was an extremely stressful experience. Everything blacked out. And what had happened is that a car from nowhere, unrelated to the child running across the road, came into the road without indicating, jumped a light, and smashed me off the Vespa. And as you can see on the picture, there was a lot of damage to my brain. There was damage to my Broca area, which is the language center. So if I lose my speech and I don't sound so coherent, please forgive me. I'm hoping I'm going to make some sense. But it really got me interested in to understand what I needed to do. I was recovering out of the coma, and it was so difficult to know what to do. Go back into personal mode if you can, Abhishek, because what happened in this process, it started to have me notice that my body was paralyzed. I couldn't speak. I couldn't control my emotions. It was an extremely stressful time. So the worst thing was that I was unable to control how my emotions were coming up, how I was feeling at the time. I would go from crying to being angry in the middle of a sentence, which obviously wasn't very clear either. But getting back in track and getting back into a functional state, I started to notice that if I started to move, just learning to get my body to move again, that would make me feel better. And I started to research this, and it ended up in my PhD thesis, looking at what you can do to improve the heart rate variability, and how that influences your well-being. And if you go back into presentation mode, Abhishek, we can see that I then stumbled across meeting Puriyamo. And out of my journey, out of the PhD, I started to research who are the people that can control their heart and can control their mind. And it ended up in a very interesting conversation with Puriyamo. We ended up doing some presentations together, and we ended up doing some interesting workshops together. And if you want to hear more about that, I'm happy to share with you at the end of today. The presentation that we're going to go through now is going to look more at the science of well-being. So if you look at the slide, we're on section 2, and here we are going to look at what happens in the brain as it goes through this process of neuroplasticity, so that we can start to observe what makes the brain flexible, what makes the brain motivated to change. What is this neuroplasticity? And neuroplasticity isn't always something healthy. Sometimes it can be unhealthy, like it was with my coma. But in the science section now, we're going to look at the brain's ability to adapt, different types of neuroplasticities, and looking at the overview of the research. But in brief, the neuroplasticity has 3 implications: structural, function, and network plasticity. And what that means, the brain can change in terms of the way it's structured, in terms of the way the different neurons connect. Functional, it can look at the difference between neurotransmitters and the action potential. And plasticity of the brain itself, in terms of the wet fat that makes up the brain, can change, as it did with mine, with the coma. So the thing that I mentioned earlier are the emotions that it goes through. So Paul Ekman did some great work, not in designing emojis, but in defining what are the core emotions. Have a look at these emojis and see if they are accurate in connecting with the core emotions that Ekman described. Okay, I don't think they're the best emojis, but in terms of them being clear enough, I hope that's okay. The goal with the presentation now is to give you a quick understanding of how these emotions function and how you can use this information to influence your own well-being through changing your own emotional state. So the brain functions, according to Paul Ekman, with these core emotions, from fear to disgust to surprise, happiness, which is all our favorites, as well as sadness and anger. So have a think with me and consider what are the core emotions. And I'm going to play an emoji game with you and see if you can tell me what are the emotions that you are noticing. So emojis have evolved a bit, so hopefully that you can still agree with me. So what is this emoji? What emotion does this emoji represent? Okay, I hope you got that as anger. What emotion is this emoji presenting? Great, I'm sure you know that's a sad. This, in my opinion, is the most important emotion because it is the seat of the triggering of any emotional state as you become emotionally aroused. So this emoji presents fear, okay? And the fear emotion is primary in the brain because it causes this trigger of this neurological state of arousal. Anyway, we'll get to that in a bit more. I want to just get through the rest. Now, the next one is really interesting as an emoji. What emotion does this describe? And it's not a bad eyelash look, or it's not meant to be funny eyebrows. The emotion that this presents, have a think, guys. What do you think this one comes? Kylie, well done. It is disgust. That's exactly right. And disgust has also been described by Paul Ekman as being separate to contempt, but I don't think that's necessary for us to get worried about right now. The next emotion that comes up is what? What do you guys think that is? That is, yes, that is surprise. And surprise is often thought as not to be an emotion. It's just a state of arousal. Then there's in that, because fear in its own right is also a state of arousal. And what happens with the neurological function, all surprise is initially fear. That is how the brain is designed, to make sure that we don't get eaten or trampled or get into any other kind of harm's way. So the goal of the fear response is slightly before the surprise response, but it is very close in terms of nanoseconds. So the surprise response that we all have is non-fearful. Or is it fearful? I mean, think about it. When you have a surprise, is that a fear response? Is that an excitement response? Is it a shock response? Now, what feelings do you associate with surprise? Okay, it's a difficult question, but I'm hoping that all of you know what the next emotion is. I hope that you all can work out that this is happiness. Okay, so I hope I've got through the key emotions with you. And now what I'm doing, we're going to play a game. And the game is going to be best done with a pen or on your phone, it doesn't matter, but somewhere where you can write quickly. So the idea here is for you to see if you can identify these emotions on these faces. So have a look at these 6 faces and see if you can make a note. Now, is 1 happiness, 2 disgust, 3 whatever. Okay, so here are the 6 faces, and tell me when you've finished making your 6 emotions associated with these 6 faces, face 1 through 6. Okay, here we go. Tell me when you're done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Anyone doing it? Anyone getting it? Very good. Keep going. Okay, brilliant. So let me now break the hack and show you which emojis are associated with which faces, and see you now can unhack or notice the association with anger, fear, disgust, etc. So hopefully you're starting to notice what are the things that are happening. What are the things that are going on in someone's face when they are having an emotion? Well-being emotional states of positive or negativity show up on the face, show up in the body. People forget that the brain is part of a body. It's not separate, floating in some petri dish. Our hands, our face, our legs, our full body, right down to our gut, is part of the brain. The neurological system goes right through our stomach, etc. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. What I want you to do is tell me if you can remember what was the initial emotion that I described. What was that initial emotion? Can you remember that word? Guys, anything coming up for you? It's social anxiety. Okay, it actually is fear. But fear shows up very, very debilitating in a social anxiety form. What happens to the brain is it's basically a tribal organ. The brain is designed to be social. And when we have a social anxiety, it causes this flood of fear hormones. And if you go onto presenter mode, Abhishek, we can notice that if we have this fear response, it can cause this response in our body. It causes us to have this felt experience. I mean, you're not on the camera right now, so maybe you want to actually just play with what happens in your body and brain as you try it out. Make a fear response. Notice what's happened in the eyes. Notice what's happening in the shoulders. Notice what's happening in the mouth. What we're going to do right now is we're going to go through and put back into presenter mode. Abhishek, you can see that we're going to look at the Mona Lisa and why she is so emotionally complex. There's been this discussion through the ages. What is the Mona Lisa thinking? And it basically means, according to me, what is she feeling? And then that asks the question, what is the difference between an emotion and a feeling? Have a think. Drop me a note. Tell me what you think is an emotion and a feeling. Or is there a difference? Or are they the same thing? The spelling that makes the difference. Have a think. What's a feeling? What's an emotion? In my opinion, the difference is all on the face. It's all based on Paul Ekman and many other people in facial affect theory, looking at the different parts of the face and how that research leads directly into an emotion. An emotion happens first. When we notice that felt experience, we then have a feeling. So emotions are neurological, feelings are psychological, they are conscious. We notice how we're feeling when we notice, when we become conscious of that. Emotions happen pre-consciously, and then as they become conscious, we label them in certain areas. In fact, it's a part of the research we're doing at the Institute of Organizational Neuroscience and looking at the function of the emotion on well-being, which leads directly into the work around neuroplasticity and the emerging discipline of the neuroplastician, which I will speak about at the end if I don't get too distracted. So what Ekman and his colleagues did, they noticed that if you look at the eye muscles and the mouth muscles, you can start to notice the emotional triggers very well. And this work has been very well applied by Pixar and Disney to make animated characters look more real, simply by knowing which part of their face is giving away their emotion. Back to Mona Lisa for a second. This is why Mona Lisa is so difficult to understand what she is thinking. She has this poise about her. She has this aura about her, but we don't really know what's going on behind her head. We don't even know what Da Vinci was thinking when he painted her, but she was a real person. And as we picture Mona Lisa in our mind, and we overlay that visual of her face, we can notice what the research with Ekman and many others have done to notice what's going on. So we can see the Mona Lisa is very complicated in terms of facial affect coding. We can see that there's anger in her left eye as she is wincing it slightly. There's fear in the right as she is widening the whites of her eyes. Slightly happy on the right, slightly disgusted on the left. bit of sadness under the chin, but no surprise. So we have the impression that Mona Lisa knows. She has a wisdom, she has a knowing about her. And that is interesting because there is no surprise look about her. She's sitting there in a sense of, I know you, but you don't know me. So that is what we noticed. In fact, as the facial affect theory breaks it down, we see how much happy, disgust, fear, anger, and surprise was going on according to Ekman's theory. And how does this relate to well-being? And this is where I want to get back into the science for a bit and understanding what is going on in the brain. Basically, we're having this social anxiety response. The fear response that we're having is associated to a state of neuropsychological unsafety or safety if you have it. And that leads into noticing how we're processing language in our brain, how it is driven by the function specifically of the superior temporal cortex as part of the limbic system, as it is associated at the back of the brain with the posterior parietal cortex, but without the jargon getting in the way. It's basically the self-experience and the words we use cause us to have an impression of feeling safe or feeling fear. And there was some great work done by Paul Zak at the Claremont Business School. And what he found is that the neuroscience of trust very effectively describes what's happening on in the brain. No trust, no safety, lots of fear. No fear, lots of safety, lots of trust. So this has a direct impact on the brain. And if you go into full presenter mode, Abhishek, we can see that there are 4 key neurotransmitters, which I call the dose model: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and epinephrine. I can't do 4 then. So those 4 key emotions are triggered to relationships with neurotransmitters. So we can see that dopamine has a sense of reward and happiness when that neurotransmitter is triggered. It causes us then to build that relationship with oxytocin, is known as the trust hormone. And when we have that sense of trust and connection, we then have a sense of well-being. That oxytocin is very much linked to activity of mother and child bonding. It's very opportune to notice in sports teams that these oxytocin levels rise. And when there is this sense of connection, it makes us feel safe. It makes us feel trusted, and that is when we feel calm and the serotonin levels increase. And when we have these in check, we then have enough energy to go on. Back to presentation mode, Abhishek, we can then see that these different dosing of these different neurotransmitters causes us to be out of sync. So not enough dopamine, not enough motivation, not enough oxytocin, not enough safety, not enough serotonin, too much stress, which causes cortisol as one of the byproducts, as I'm sure you know. And if there's enough endorphin and epinephrine, we then feel this healthy state to proceed. We feel cool, calm, and collected, as my grandmother used to say. And as we do that, we can then see how we can take lead. We can then notice how we have the ability to be plastic in our behavior and how that causes neuroplasticity to proceed. So I want to look at some of the neural mechanisms for a second and how that influences our choice around eating or sleeping or friends or whatever, and then looking at how they can be used as a fulcrum for growth. I wanted to start with an overview of looking at how the brain functions using some technology. So I wanted to do a little presentation of how the brain works. So in the top right, you can see how well I'm doing. And in the top left, you can see a scan of the brain itself. So what I want to do is to do a brain scan of myself. I'm bringing out the technology now, and I'm gonna stick it to my head so that you can see how this works. So what we're going to do now is see how effectively I am managing my own well-being in the moment, and to see how my state is functioning. So let's see if I am stressed or not stressed. The goal with using this technology is to see how we can normalize our own well-being so that we're not getting too much arousal or too much stress or too much lackadaisical, low motivation. But in a presentation, we're probably going to see me have some kind of spike in my stress response. So look at the graph on the left, which the one on the right is the heart, but look at the one on the left to look at my brain activity. Okay, so as we can see, there was a big spike on the left, and if you look at that little spike on the graph, we can see that while doing this presentation, I've had heightened arousal, and that's normal. I mean, of course, I'm in a presentation mode. It is more stressful than sitting around and watching Netflix. But the point of this overview and looking at this experience is to notice that your emotions poison your well-being. And if we're going to be aware of how to manage that to improve our well-being, we need to look at what we can do to improve our own plasticity through working out what can improve your development and your well-being. So I want to look at some strategies, some techniques, and even if we've got a time to do some exercises. So let's get down to it. We're going to look at three things quickly. What is resilience in the brain? What does that actually look at from well-being? What is the function of social engagement? And what are some of the things around deep work where you focus and concentrate and improve your function to perform at cognitive tasks? So in terms of brain resilience, I want to start with learning how to sneeze yourself healthy. The sneeze model is a little acronym to simply describe the key parts of what makes up neuroplasticity to ensure healthy brain. And the first S stands for sleep. If you don't get your sleep right, you don't get your brain in check. You need to sleep first. Sleep first, all shall follow. And not just any kind of sleep, but sleep quality where you're getting into that deep REM state, where you're getting into a space where you are applying the learning of the day and you're getting the brain to process that information. The brain in a REM state isn't very restful. In REM, your brain is replaying the activities that you experienced, and if those were useful, the brain will embed them into your memory centers so that you can apply that learning in the next day. So the brain works in metaphors and in stories, so it doesn't often make sense when you remember our brains, but you need to move from REM into deep sleep so that you actually rest. You need to move from REM, from the learning, building that neuroplasticity, and then into deep sleep so that you actually get to energize your brain and your body for applying the learning next day. So the important part of this are not only the sleep, which is obviously, in my opinion, the most important, but nutrition, exercise, attention, social, and energy well-being are also very important. We can go through this in a lot more detail at another point, but just focus on the presenter again on that, Abhishek. The parts of this that are most important are understanding what makes for sleep hygiene. Going to bed on time is the first thing. Looking at light when you wake up is the second thing. Not eating too close to bedtime, at least 3 hours before you go to bed, makes a big difference. And making sure that you have put your stuff away before you get to bed. Don't take stuff to bed. I mean, obviously, everybody, you can't not have your phone near you, but turn the thing off so that it doesn't ping you in the night and it doesn't make you want to look at it and get distracted. Turn it off so that you can sleep and reboot your brain. The nutrition is a very important part, and probably the second most important part, other than the next. But sleep is important and emotions are important, but nutrition has a direct link to the gut-brain axis. There are a lot of neurotransmitters floating around your stomach, which you may or may not know. And if you have eaten, your body will start producing serotonin. So the blood flow moves into your stomach, so you don't have so much head space to think. That's why it's important to have a siesta after a meal, and it's important to have your primary meal in the middle of the day, and then try and have a siesta. That is ideal. Obviously, it's not possible for everybody, but that is the ideal. Eating a lot of non-sugar based things like protein or vegetables, a lot of fiber is very valuable. But I'm not here to be a nutritionist and give you a diet plan. Stay away from the carbs, eat in the middle of the day, have a siesta. That helps with digestion. The third one is about having consistent exercise. Now, exercise is a huge topic, just like nutrition. However, my opinion on exercise is to simply never run. Never run, because your knees bomb out and then you can't do any other exercise. Rather walk briskly, rather go for a swim, rather do some yoga, which is really, really hard for me. My body is so inflexible. So I'll break up into a sweat after like 15 minutes. So yoga is very good for me. There are three kinds of exercise, or at least three. There is strength, there is conditioning, and there is cardio. Strength is going to the gym or going at home and picking up weights or doing some kinds of weight-bearing activity. As you get older, that is so important to keep muscle mass, because without muscle mass, you don't really have enough strength to do anything. So you need to keep your muscle mass. The second thing is flexibility. You need to keep your body supple enough so that you don't get all hunched up and you can't actually move around. So keep yourself flexible and strong. Cardiac exercise like running or swimming are vital for cardiac heart health. So you need to have that to pump the blood out of the heart and through the body. However, a lot of those exercises are overdone, especially if you're carrying weight, especially if you're not fit. Do cardio last. It feels good. You get a great release of dopamine after cardio exercise. Go for a swim, go for a brisk walk, play the fool. That's always my favorite, because it impacts your affect. And we're going to unpack what affect means and your attention to have specific in a bit. But it's really looking at what is going on in your brain at the emotional level and how that informs your brain's ability to problem solve. The simple rule of thumb to know around your well-being is that emotions are always first to the event. Your thinking and your problem solving are always emotional. It's just the way the brain is designed. Your limbic system and your neurotransmitters inform the pre-cognitive parts, the parts of the brain in the basal areas, not in the top cortex or the prefrontal cortex of your thinking brain. So the goal is for you to remember that if you're going to pay attention, you need to pay attention to your emotion. You need to get your affective well-being in place. You need to feel good, okay? The second last one is around your social positive contact. It's so important for people to have social contact. Some people are introverts, some are extroverts, and that's okay. I need more social time than my wife, for example. So I make more time to go hang out with friends and even make new friends. And we're living in Germany at the moment, so I really have to practice speaking German, and I really have to make an effort to connect with people. But it's a good activity to learn a new language. It's good for neuroplasticity to learn new skills. And as you learn new skills, remember they're always going to be emotional, so do something fun. And also remember, do it in a social environment. It makes it so much more likely to be sticky. The last point on the sneeze model is the energy. So you need to make sure that you're keeping your energy up. What gives you energy? What are the things that make you feel that you're in a state of well-being? Is it going for a run? Maybe you should go for a walk or for a swim instead. Is it having a donut? Maybe you can think of another, like a dark chocolate fiber-based biscuit. What makes you sleep well? Maybe you can set an alarm to go to bed. What are the kind of emotional and social and activities that are going to drive your brain into a state of well-being? It takes a lot of work to be at ease. It really does. You need to spend time focusing on these and knowing how to sneeze. I know it's not spelled right. Sneeze is different, but we're over COVID, so sneezing has become a whole new thing. The idea around this is to make sure that you build tools so that you can effectively apply this. So go back into presentation mode if we're not in that already, Abhishek. But what I want to do quickly is look at what are the things that build resilience, build function, and build the ability to do deep work so that you can concentrate, you can perform at cognitive tasks. So let's go through some of the tools. The first tool is called the ABCD test, which comes out of the work originally done at Harvard. But I've described this in 4 categories, 4 kinds of profiles that are likely to have a heart attack or not. The type D personality, according to the Harvard research, shows that if you're a type D personality, according to these 10 questions, so I have a pen, we're going to do the test in a second if we have time, but it shows that certain kinds of people are likely and actually will have heart attacks if they fall into the type D category. So let's go through the questionnaire and then I'll describe what these different categories are. So is everybody ready with a pencil or a phone? There's only 10 questions with true or false, so it's not much you need to write down, but it might be helpful for you to just be ready with a pen. So here are the first 5 questions. True or false? I'm happy making small talk. Are you happy making small talk or not? True or false? Just answer these quickly. I don't like speaking to new people. You don't like speaking to them? Well, then put down a true. If you do like speaking to them, put down a false. Okay? I prefer my own privacy over going to social events. If you prefer your own privacy, write true. If you prefer social events than being alone, write false. And number 4, when I meet new people, I often don't know what to say. Now that's true. Click the true box or the false. You can see how my brain sometimes still gets lost in words after the coma. Anyway, that was many moons ago. Have you got those true, false answers? Great. let's look at the second 8. So people often say, I worry too much about little things. Is that true? Or is it false? Number 6, lately I often feel unhappy. Quickly, I don't know, quickly think about that. And most of the time, others seem happier than me. So we're looking at these as markers of mental well-being, of healthy relationships. And what we can see from the work that these 4 categories fall into 4 different types of people. I mean, if you look at professorkennedy.com, there is the more details, and you can do the full test, or you can contact me via professorkennedy.com, where I can share more information. But type A shows to be a person who is more stable emotionally and more interested socially. So the type ABCD brain test speaks around your affect, your emotion, and your social well-being. So if your emotions and your social connections are in a good place, you end up in the Oprah Winfrey space. If you're more introvert, but you're relatively social, we've suggested that someone like Bill Gates, maybe that's changed now, I don't know, but these are maybe types that need to be updated. But maybe you know Jim Carrey, who's all extrovert, but seems to be emotionally all over the place. And maybe you don't even remember who Woody Allen is, but he's introverted and is not very socially adept, according to his public profile. Who knows what these people are like in real life? But the goal of the ABCD test is to see how emotionally and socially functional your brain is, how much serotonin and oxytocin you're getting in the right places. So what I want to do now is just give you a chance to think. Even if you're an introvert, it doesn't mean you have to be social. It's about making sure that you're having enough social connection with family, with friends, because it doesn't really matter. But as long as you're feeling that your social tank is effective, it's really important to notice how much your social well-being influences your neurological and your physical well-being. In the same way, your affect, your emotional well-being has a direct impact on your well-being. So mental health is emotional health. Mental health is social health. Please let me drive these points home, and let's now look at how to improve your ability to do deep work. Some people think that the left brain and the right brain have abilities to be creative or logical, and they have the ability that you can play games to define what kind of brain kind you have. The research is it's pretty much untrue. The brain doesn't have a specific logical, arithmetic, creative style. The brain is more looking at how to do deep work. And when I speak about deep work, I want to play a game with you and looking at how the brain focuses and processes information. So answer this question. If a bat and a ball cost $110 and the bat costs $100 more, my camera just fell down. How funny is that? And if the let me just start again. Okay, so a bat and a ball cost 110. The bat costs more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Okay, so you've got 2 things, a bat and a ball. Together, they're 110. The bat costs more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? If you know that the bat costs 110. It sounds like a simple question, or maybe it sounds complicated. There's 3 things you know. You know that the bat and the ball together cost 110. You know that the bat costs more than the ball, and you know that you need to work out how much the ball costs. The reflex of the brain is to say that the brain is working out a shortcut, and it says that the ball is worth $5. But that's a wrong process. The answer is actually quite complicated. Most people would say that the ball would cost 10. Together they cost 110. We know that the bat costs more, so we assume that the bat costs 100. And then we assume that the $10 belongs to the ball. However, we need to look at the language. The bat costs $100 more than the ball, which means that we don't know how much the bat costs. We just know that the $100 belongs to the bat. So actually we only have $10 left. So what do we do with this $10? Well, according to logical theory, we have to split the $10 between the two would fit, but the most logical would be to share the 10 equally. So then we know the bat costs 105, and therefore the ball would cost 105. We know together they're 110. We know that 100 belongs to the bat. Therefore, we've got $10 left over. Split them equally. Therefore, we know the ball costs $5. So now we're into the last part of the presentation, and I'm hoping this is all going well and you're understanding that there are 6 things you need to do to get your brain in check to build that neuroplasticity, and start thinking around with me, what are the key things that you are taking away from today? Start thinking, what are the ideas that are sticking with you around neuroplasticity? I'm hoping you're getting 3 things. The first is that your brain is lazy. I didn't discuss this much today. I discussed it in my TED talk, which I think is on professorkennedy.com. But anyway, either way, the brain is eager not to spend energy. The brain wants to store energy. That is why carbs and sugar get saved so quickly into the body, because the brain doesn't want to lose those energy resources. So your brain is lazy. Be aware of that. Build habits. It gets over the lazy hurdle. The second is your brain is your body. Don't think that your brain is in a separate environment. Don't think Descartes was right. The brain and the body function together. You've got neurotransmitters firing all over your body. What you eat influences what you think. How you sleep will influence your mood and your ability to concentrate. And as I've been driving home the whole time, the link between emotional and social well-being drives everything. Your emotional relationship to food, your social experience over Thanksgiving, these all influence how you are functioning. So how do you apply all this? How do you understand effectively to use neuroplasticity? Well, the simple answer is you can just go and do anything, start changing your habits. The research we've been doing at the Institute has shown that because we are working with a social organ, the brain is a social organ, we work better with a coach or with a practitioner. So we are busy defining the discipline of the neuroplastician, the expert who can facilitate neuroplasticity. So with our community of Ph.D. candidates and professors and coaches and other experts in education, we are able to offer you a consultation around improving your neuroplasticity at no charge. So what you need to do is you need to take this opportunity, because it's free, and use it in any way you like. The idea is for you to simply be in contact. Go onto professorkennedy.com or Prof profkennedy.com. Thanks for putting the link up there. It makes it a bit quicker. The first link is to my website to get an appointment. The second is the ION forum where we're doing the research, and there's all the practitioners there. And the NPN Hub is the community of this place where we're looking to help people build their neuroplasticity one brain at a time. So I hope this toolkit was useful for you. I hope you got to see your inner Mona Lisa by taking some selfies. I hope you put your Harvard cap on and looked at your personality, and hope you got to snap this all together so that we can look at building your psychological safety and sneezing your brain into a healthy space. I hope that was fun. Thank you so much, everybody. I really enjoyed this. Abhishek, thanks for organizing all the events. It's really nice. I hope we get to speak again. Please don't forget to be in contact. The goal is for you to take action. Without action, there is no neuroplasticity. You don't have to be in contact with me, of course not. You don't have to speak to one of the neuroplasticians, of course not. But think about what can you do about your sleep? What can you do about your nutrition? What about your exercise? In fact, the brain has shown to improve your relationship with your temporal functions by walking backwards. In fact, try walking backwards. You see how exhausting it is. It's a fun thing to do, as it is with looking at your emotional and your felt experience and building up your energy. So Abhishek, thank once again. Please remind the people to go look at profkennedy.com, join the developing the discipline of the neuroplastician. Connect with me. I'll share with you a book. We'll give you a free consultation, and let's build a relationship. As I said, the brain is a social organ. Let's do this together. Thanks so much.